Well, hello there, good people. Hi, I'm Jason with Green Country Agroforestry. This is Mary, of course. Today is Wednesday. What day is today? The 18th of August, 7:30 p.m. Central Time. What?
Oh yeah, it's
What?
18th.
Oh, yeah, that's just that thing. If you're watching this on replay, of course, if you're watching this on the replay, it is once again time for our weekly live stream. And today we're going to be talking about Mercury. And is it on yet?
Oh, I'm waiting for the update to show up on the push notifications
Uh-huh.
on my phone and other people's phones.
Okay.
So, did you bring your guitar?
Yeah, I brought my guitar. I guess I can do a little bit of a picking and grinning and playing. People are getting through the commercials at the moment. Fun times.
Oh. Does the microphone work now?
I hope it does.
It's green.
Yeah, it's turned on.
Oh.
It's turned on anyway. All right.
If you show up on time, you get a bonus.
Maybe sometimes.
Minus the ad.
Minus the ads, and of course, it's not always a great bonus. I mean, sometimes the music is good. Sometimes the music is.
As soon as the ad is over, go to the beginning and put on times 2. It'll make him sound like a Smurf. You might have to do times 2. We're doing a little time test here. I have the notification. We have the ad. Continue playing. Oh, Jesus. It's annoying. We have the ad. Continue playing. Oh, Jesus. It's annoying.
Hey, we got some people coming in. Hey, we got some people coming in. Hi, everybody. How you doing? Oi. So we decided to do this outside today, or actually, I decided to do this outside today. Mary wanted to be inside where the air conditioning is. It's still hot out here in Northeast Oklahoma. But yes, today we're going to be talking about mercury. We're going to be talking about how it is formed, how it winds up being used by us for various purposes, and how it winds up getting into our food supply, where it can wind up in things like, well, these wonderful ahi tuna fillets, which probably dinner tomorrow. But before we get started on all of that, hi, how's everybody doing? We've been kind of busy this week. Well, I have anyway, doing stuff here around the house, and not always stuff that really I could put on camera for the purposes of a garden show. Sometimes there are other tasks that have to get done with home ownership, and not all of those make really good television. Mary's been out driving almost nonstop. And our tomatoes are coming on like gangbusters now. There's about 6 pounds of tomatoes in the basket right here, which we'll have to preserve somehow. We'll probably eat a few of those on hamburgers today or tomorrow, but the rest of them are going to have to get preserved somehow. And out there behind you in the front yard, oh, this one's starting to wilt. Oh, it got all wilty.
You just picked that.
I just picked it. It got all wilty.
It's hot.
Yeah, it's hot out there. Okay, so
It's
out there in the front yard, we have a variety of flowers going on. And let me show you these real quick.
What do you have there?
I've got
Yeah.
These are some of the perennial flowers. This is the alfalfa. Is that in frame? Can you see it?
Very light purple.
Light purple. Yep. There's some of the seed forming right there. This one, which unfortunately got all wilty, is a pink soba buckwheat. It's a lot prettier whenever it's spread.
Is it have the heart shape?
Yeah, this is the one that makes those little heart-shaped seeds whenever they're fully developed. And right now, unfortunately, it got all wilty on me.
Your fingers are in the way.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Well.
Fat fingers.
Yeah. And then this purple thing here is a little sprig of the elephant trunk amaranth,
which is like a beast.
Yeah, it grows really well here.
Yeah, no matter what.
The pink soba buckwheat and the alfalfa are perennials. The amaranth is an annual, but it reseeds itself so readily it may as well be a perennial. So these are the kind of things that are producing flowers for us in the front yard at the moment.
So you really work with that pink flower.
We still have a few of the canna lilies that are in bloom, and daylily is a little bit more sporadically right now. Wait.
That pink flower might need a little something because it just went up really quick.
It just wilted right away, didn't it? Buckwheat. Yep.
Like from the noodles?
Huh?
Buckwheat noodles?
Yeah, like you would make the soba noodles. Well, that's why soba noodles are called soba noodles. Oh. Soba is buckwheat. Oh, okay. If you're Japanese, anyway. Right. Okay. So if you're going to be growing buckwheat and you're going to be making noodles out of buckwheat because you like having noodles in your food, and who doesn't, it's a good idea to have something with some gluten in it. You could grow a little bit of rice and mix some of the rice flour in there just so that your noodles will hold together while you're making your noodles. You can make pure soba, pure buckwheat noodles, but I understand it's difficult. But if you're an expert noodle maker, you can pull it off. I'm not an expert noodle maker.
You got a few people in comments.
Yep. All right, let's take a look, see we got. Red here. That's not best to eat mercury than inject it. It's a crying shame says hiya. How to garden says hello, Jason. It's a crying shame also is planning on having some burgers. It's a good time for burgers. Whenever you got big tomatoes like this coming in on a daily basis, it's time to eat some burgers or bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches, or any way you can eat them. We're overflowing with that particular fruit right now.
Is red? Who's red?
Red is a different person.
It's not red.
It's not Spitfire Red, and it's not Sassafras Red. Oh. That makes three viewers I know of that go by the name Red. So yeah, you found the nitrate video. Thank you. I did want to steer people away from the other use of nitrates, although most people that watch that one are looking for, things that go boom. But there are other uses for nitrate other than just things that go boom. And if you're only interested in gardening, you can have an awful lot of interesting reagents in your shed. Hello, Eric Hale, and everyone else out there. All right. I guess before the rest of the audience disappears, we'll get started.
All three of you.
All three of you. Wait, how many accounts are you currently signed in on?
2.
Oh, okay. So all 2 of you.
The other 2. It's not me.
Looking to preserve foods. Hey, yeah. If you live far away from the ocean, potassium nitrate is a good preservative. If you have to find some way to make a preservative, there you go. If you're one of those people that happens to like the way corned beef tastes, among the many different spices used to preserve corned beef is potassium nitrate. That's what gives it that wonderful bright pink color. And now you know.
It sounds gross.
Well, only if you think too hard about how it was made. If you think too hard about it, yeah, it is a little bit on the gross side. But we use different kind of chemicals for different purposes, and we have for a long time. Mercury has been used industrially for at least 3,000 years now, and a lot longer than that if we look into things like cave painting, because one of the easiest to find naturally occurring compounds of mercury, sources of mercury ore out there, is called cinnabar, and it is mercury sulfide. Mercury sulfide or cinnabar is what makes the pigment known as vermilion. And we've been using that since before recorded history. All right. So 8 light minutes away from here, we've got a fusion reaction going on that we call the sun.
You're skipping ahead.
I'm not skipping ahead. I'm actually starting at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
You see, right now on the surface of the sun, or close to the surface, or what we would think of as the surface of the sun, which is gaseous, so surface is kind of a relative term, hydrogen is being fused with hydrogen to form helium. As the sun enters into a later stage of its development, close to the surface or in the corona of the sun, helium will be bonding with helium to form more dense elements. But in the heart of all stars, very dense elements can be found. And those dense elements, whenever they are released from the star through, say, a supernova or whatever thing that leads to the end of that particular star, can form into new bodies that we like to call planets. We have a whole bunch of those elements on this planet, down below our feet in the molten core of the planet, and occasionally bits of that work their way up to the surface. Now, depending upon what pressure and temperature those various elements are, determines when they'll precipitate out or when they'll change their phase. Phases, for people that didn't take chemistry in high school, I guess, are solid, liquid, and gaseous. And if you include gases under high temperature and pressure, plasma, but we don't really see much plasma here on planet Earth. So mainly solid, liquid, and gaseous states. The drink that Mary has on the table here, of course, the drink that I have in my cup have mostly water in them in a liquid state. But we know that liquids can change to different phases, like gases or solids, depending upon temperature. But they also change according to pressure. So many of you know that you can take a pan of water and boil it at sea level at a certain temperature, 212 degrees, give or take, more or less. Or if you're using the Celsius scale, 100 degrees Celsius. But that same pan of water can be boiled at a lower temperature at a higher altitude. And the reason for that is the atmospheric pressure. The pressure on the liquid changes the point where it goes into a vapor state. The same holds true for all elements, not just water, which is a compound actually of hydrogen and oxygen. All elements have vapor points, and those vapor points do not have a standard scale based upon their mass. So the mass of a particular element doesn't determine what its vapor point is going to be. I don't know exactly what determines what the vapor point is going to be. You probably have to ask somebody who's a little bit more on the ball with their physics than I am for that.
Maybe red.
Maybe your head.
Don't ask old Sergeant. He's here for his lookings.
Eric is asking if I am a teacher.
Kind of.
Sort of, not professionally. Well, I know. If somebody pays me for teaching, then I guess I'll be professionally a teacher.
You're good at research. If you don't mind the boring parts.
Yeah, I'm an old-fashioned science geek, and I get excited about learning things, and I like to share what I learned. That's about what it is. Hi, Sarge.
Which is great for phone conversations.
We have a different kitty. We have a different kitty outside than inside. Okay, so vapor points, pressures, and temperatures.
Did you bring him his glass of water?
Fast forward a couple 100 million years. And we're on planet Earth with these materials working their way up from underneath the ground, through the mantle to the surface. And as they reach a certain vapor point, remember pressure and temperature, they precipitate out of a solution and become solid minerals. This is the reason why you will find certain minerals in conjunction with other minerals. For example, what are you tapping me?
Oh, I was talking to the cat.
Oh, why are you tapping me if you're talking to the cat?
Directional.
Oh, okay. Here, kitty.
We need to give him some more water.
Oh, there we go. Hi, buddy.
Do you mind if I get him some more water?
You can get him some more water. Sergeant says hi, everybody.
Sergeant Old Kitty.
Yeah, you got in a scrap earlier this week. You had a little scratch on your head. You got to be careful, buddy. All right. So, way down south, well, south of here, in the Andes Mountains, in where? Bolivia?
Bigfoot.
Yes, Bolivia. There is a mountain that they call Potosi. Potosi.
Pause.
Potosi.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. It's been called the Mountain of Silver. It was discovered, well, it was discovered long before 1545, but the Spanish bumped into it around 1545 and started mining silver from Potosi in Bolivia, and have been mining continuously for the last 450 years. Now, in Potosi, you don't just have silver, which is the main treasure the Spanish were after, but there's also zinc and lead all together, because those three elements at the pressure and temperature that existed whenever the Andes Mountains were being formed were able to precipitate out at the same time. In the American Southwest, we have silver as well, but under different circumstances. So under the circumstances that the silver deposits were formed in the American Southwest, you find the silver in conjunction with copper instead. And in between the silver and copper, we have a wonderful little blue stone that we call turquoise. I'm probably getting a little bit sidetracked. The important thing to know is whenever the miners went to Potosi and began mining silver, they were able to find some that was free elemental silver, just those little chunks of metal that they could dig out. And that's great. But most of the silver ore found in Potosi, and really a whole bunch of other places in the world, couldn't be extracted simply by taking the ore, heating it up, and removing the liquid metal. Something else had to be done. Yes. We got water.
Yes.
There we go. All right, go on, hop on down. Mary's got water for you.
I was hoping not to be on screen this long.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Meow.
I hate to dodge
There.
the.
Try some of that fresh water. It's cold. You might like it.
I don't know how cold it is, but it doesn't have as many
right.
ants in it. Here's my butt.
So
you saw it.
the silver that wound
For a
up,
moment.
and the zinc and the lead also,
Yes,
that
yes.
wound up forming Potosi in Bolivia, is in a form that can't be removed simply by heating it. Something else was required. And that's where the mercury came in. You see, mercury can dissolve other metals, not all other metals, but most other metals can be dissolved into the mercury, forming what's called an amalgam. An amalgam is a type of alloy.
I'm catching up.
Oh, you're catching up?
And I'm
Okay.
catching up.
All right. Alloys differ from compounds in that in a compound, for example, water, we have chemical bonds that are formed between the atoms of hydrogen and the atoms of oxygen to make water. But in an alloy, there aren't chemical bonds. There may be some exchange of ions, some exchange of electrons back and forth between the various materials within the alloy, but they're not permanently bonded, which means that they can be separated by mechanical means. In other words, if there's a different vapor point for one of the metals in the alloy, or a different point that it becomes fluid, then whenever you heat the metals up, you can cause them to separate mechanically. And that, of course, is how we extract things like gold and silver out of their ores using mercury. Mercury has a much lower vapor point. So once the gold or silver is dissolved into the mercury, it can then be evaporated out, leaving behind the solid metal. And wow, the cicadas are loud out there tonight. Okay.
You're louder than them.
Really quick, let me catch up on comments and see where everybody's at. I see we got Joe Serrano showed up.
Yeah, hi, Joe.
Depends upon if you learn anything. Thank you, Eric. My mother was a teacher, but she wasn't the typical teacher. She was a speech therapist.
Lucky me.
Yeah. Went to school to learn how to teach kids how to talk right.
I had a speech impediment, so I really appreciate this.
Well,
I do.
Yeah, mainly was helping out kids with speech impediments, and so I got to spend a lot of days at the school after school was over, which gets really boring because, well, there's not really TV there, so I spent a lot of time in the library at school. That's my excuse. I'm sticking to it.
I found my way to the boiler room to work on my math. That's horrible.
All right, Joe says hello. He's 14 minutes late.
Better late than never.
Better late than never. Lead paint chips, says John Pumphrey.
That'd be my mom's house.
Well, lead is a heavy metal, and most of the compounds formed from lead are toxic. So,
Well, it's not in paint anymore, so good luck finding it actually anywhere.
Red saying government schools are doomed. Government schools have been horrible for a long time.
Into what?
A long, long time. Sometimes I think we probably would be better off if we just charged people for an education. Then they might actually go to school wanting to learn something. You're paying for it.
You mean the money follow the students?
Well, yeah, whenever you get things away for free, people don't appreciate them as much.
Like, I have to pay property tax on my house, and then next year, my mom's house.
Well, okay, it's like
There's
this.
no kid living there or here.
Most of us have fathers or mothers, or in several cases, many of us have both. But you can imagine thinking back to a time whenever your parental figure gave you advice. Probably many times a parental figure gave you advice. And whenever you're a young person and your parental figures are giving you advice, the tendency is to let it go in one ear and out the other. But that free advice that the parental figure can give you can be exactly the same as what your attorney will give you, but your attorney will charge you for it, and you're more likely to listen to your attorney.
I need an attorney, apparently.
There you go.
That just sounds good.
So whenever your parents are lecturing you, you can always tell them, Mom, Dad, tell it to my attorney will tell it to me, and I'll pay attention.
I think he will tell you that if you can win the case. That's what he cares about. Can I win this case? If not, go away.
Chances if you know that secret, then you'll probably take the free advice whenever you can get it.
Or can you win the case? Two totally different scenarios.
Okay. Joe's saying, I've heard the bigger the fish, the more mercury laden it is. That's better to stick to sardines and shrimp. Is this true? I will get to it in just a moment.
Oh, that's right. You were looking into this because the story from Mercury recruiting vegetarian fish.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
How to get
we need to examine it. Okay, first of all, we want to know why it is that we have these different metals that show up together.
Okay, Cat.
And why we use mercury in the first place. Whenever you've got a metal like silver that's bonded with other atoms out there forming compounds, you can't simply heat it to get the silver out. You have to get something that's going to break the bonds from the mixture that the silver's in. Mercury does that, puts it in a liquid state. You can mechanically separate the liquid mercury with the silver in it as an amalgam. Amalgam is simply an alloy that contains mercury. You've got your solids out of the way. Now you've got a liquid. You can now heat your liquid, get the mercury to evaporate out, leaving you behind your solid silver. Boom. Easy enough. Funny story. Actually, not that funny. But back during the American Gold Rush, was it 1849? No, 1849, 69, 79, 69.
It's before the Great
The California
Depression.
Gold Rush. Anyway.
Before that.
And presumably also during the gold rush in the Black Hills as well.
Yeah, be still.
Prospectors would get their mercury to get their gold out of the ore that they were digging up, because you didn't always find nice, neat nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
They would pour the mercury into the pan to dissolve the metals that could be dissolved. Incidentally, iron does not dissolve into mercury. It's one of the few that doesn't. So if you had black sand mining for gold, usually you find black sand and gold together. Black sand is an oxidized iron. The iron doesn't get into a solution with the mercury, but the gold will. The miner would then take the liquid portion, the mercury, and take a potato, and I kid you not, dig a hole out of the potato, pour the mercury amalgam into it, plug it up, and put it in the embers of the campfire and cook it. In the process, the mercury would vaporize and leave the gold behind in the potato.
And then voila.
A simple retort to remove the mercury. Unfortunately, it didn't capture the mercury. The mercury escaped as vapor. Well, whatever didn't form bonds with the materials of the potato. Sometimes miners would eat the potatoes.
They didn't know any better.
Hopefully they knew better, but yeah, chances are they didn't.
They didn't know better.
Well, people have been accidentally poisoning themselves with heavy metals for a long time. Heavy metal poisoning is no laughing matter. As a matter of fact, that one of the, I wasn't even going to mention that, but one of the
we're demonetized now. Sorry.
One of the effects that you encounter whenever you have heavy metal poisoning is an immune response. It causes our white blood cells to go haywire. I guess you could say it's having a heavy metal in your system is kind of like having a paper wasp nest on the table at a picnic, and you've got a whole bunch of friends around, and you go and throw a rock at the wasp nest. Now the wasp might go after the person who threw the rock. That would be actually what's causing the irritation. But they're just as likely to go at everything sitting around the table. In this case, what's sitting around the table is your heart, your kidneys, your lungs, your liver, your spleen, your brain, your skin. You get the picture. The immune response that we get from that can potentially teach your body how to attack your own organs. This is where autoimmune system disorders come from heavy metal toxicity. And it's not just from mercury, it's from assorted other heavy metals that we've introduced into our food system over time. But today we're specifically going to be talking about mercury and how it got into the food system. Well, we know that we were using it for industrial applications to extract metals, and we still use it for that purpose even to this day. We're just a lot more careful with it now because we know and understand how dangerous it can be once it escapes out of our control, slips through our fingers, so to speak, and gets into the food supply. What happens is I'm going to have to go and put a pin in that for a moment and tell you about something else real quick.
Mining?
No, bacteria, specifically extremophile bacteria. You see down at the bottom of the ocean, we have spots where our continental plates are moving together and apart, forming rift zones where hot water or water goes down, makes contact with the mantle, gets superheated, and comes back up in the form of vents. These vents spew forth a wide variety of different elements at really, really high temperatures deep under the surface of the ocean, places where there isn't really a whole lot of oxygen deep underneath the surface of the ocean, down in the trench valleys. A lot of the elements that are being spewed out of here contain compounds of sulfur. We've got pyrites, marcasites, stibnites. Stibnite is a compound of antimony and sulfur. Pyrite is iron and sulfur. Marcasite is also iron and sulfur. It's just a different oxidized form of iron. And of course, mercury sulfide, which is
the bad one. Unless it's farted out by a bacteria.
Mercury sulfide is cinnabar.
Oh, cinnabar.
Cinnabar. All right. Now, existing around these vents are a number of bacteria that can live in those incredibly high temperatures in the absence of oxygen, and they feed on, among other things, the sulfur that's coming out of those vents. So in the process of separating the sulfur from the other components that are in those compounds, they free up some of those elements. Well, in the case of mercury, whenever one of those anaerobic extremophile bacteria makes contact and gets the sulfur out of the mercury sulfide, they have to do something with the mercury. And what they do with it is add a carbon and 3 hydrogen atoms to it, making methyl mercury. And methyl mercury, unlike other forms, is a form that can be taken up by plants, specifically phytoplankton. That's little microscopic plants. Usually we find growing within the first few hundred feet of the ocean's surface. Yes?
That's where salmon?
Well, not ultimately. You see, the salmon don't eat the phytoplankton.
Maybe you're fry for your
There are zooplankton, microscopic animals, that eat the phytoplankton. Same as here on Earth on the surface with chickens and cattle and sheep and everything else. You've got your herbivores grazing on your plants. Only this is at the microscopic level in the ocean. And then larger organisms consume those zooplankton and so on and so forth until finally we get to our predatory species, like the salmon and the tuna, that are busily eating the smaller organisms that have been working their way up the food chain. But at every point, that mercury gets concentrated and concentrated and concentrated because the body doesn't really have a good way of getting rid of it.
What do you do with mercury? Let's say I get a bunch of vaccines, like tetanus vaccines. Where does that go? I mean, I have immune response.
Well, hopefully
because of it, but
hopefully something that we ingest will be capable of bonding with it and carrying it out of our bodies.
Right.
Well, that's what the detox chemicals and treatments are for.
What exactly? There aren't any.
Well, there are, but
Really?
I didn't prepare any of today's talk for dealing with
But that
chelation and removing toxic metals from your system once you've got them. Mainly today, we're talking about preventing getting them into your system in the first place. Ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure and all that.
But I love sushi. What do I do?
That's true. Well, maybe you have to love silver and gold a bit less.
No, sushi. Delicious. What do I do? Come on. What do I eat instead? Come on, I love fish.
Well, if you want to eat fish, but you're worried about heavy metal concentrations, not just mercury, but lead and everything else in your fish or in your food, then you can look at getting your food from a source that would not have accumulated the mercury in the first place. That means herbivores, fish that mainly eat the plants, and if at all possible, prevent the circumstances in your water supply from forming the methyl mercury in the first place, which means eliminate the anaerobic circumstances, sediments at the bottom of the pond or the lake where you're getting your fish. Incidentally, if you've got
have to pick your runoff.
If you've got a lake that has been formed by damming the lake, then sediments will accumulate. You'll develop an anaerobic layer at the bottom of the lake, which allows. Ooh, that breeze is nice. It's cooling us off.
I know.
That will allow for those extremophile bacteria that are capable of producing the methyl mercury in the first place from developing and forming. So if the mercury winds up running off into that water reservoir, having sedimentation at the bottom from, for example, damming it up, creates the circumstances that allow you to be poisoned. So the first thing you want to do is let the water flow. Don't dam up your rivers. Let them wash out. Get rid of the sedimentation.
Like the Nile from ancient Egyptian texts and the Old Testament.
Before they built the Aswan Dam, you had the Nile River flooded every year, and it made the land fertile. The sediment never built up. You never had anaerobic circumstances, and you didn't have to worry about the creation of methyl mercury within the lake formed behind the dam. Right. Anywhere we've got man-made dams, we have potential problems from methyl mercury accumulation.
Man-made dams.
All
I
right.
have to point that out.
Okay. So we want fish. First off, we want fish that eat plants, primarily plants. So we aren't vegetarian fish, or at least fish that are capable of surviving on a mostly vegetarian diet. So tilapia are great, mullet are great. I'm planning on, hopefully next year, if I can scrape up the cash for it, starting up a small pond here in the front yard behind where the camera is right now, and growing long-eared sunfish in there. They're omnivorous. They eat everything.
They're assholes.
But
they bully bass.
You can't say that word whenever we're broadcasting live.
Just leave it. You can unmonetize that part.
Okay. We'll go back and edit that whenever.
Sun ears are.
She's making more work for me later on. You see how she is.
Anyway,
so the long-eared sunfish will eat anything. And I'm going to go close this door real quick.
Because squeaky.
Well, yeah, I don't want the indoor cat and the outdoor cat to get together.
Because they'll scrap.
Well,
she'll kick his butt.
They'll get in a tussle and they'll exchange germs, and
no, more like
he's got immunities to things that she's never been exposed to. So
no, the asshole. I mean, the outside.
Really? That's two beeps now.
The outside. We got long beep. The outside cat like, never mind. I'm walking away. Because he just stands there like, oh. Well,
in the world he lives in, if somebody spits and hisses at him, then it's either get it on or back down, and back down means you probably survive longer.
But then he gets the whole yard to himself. And he's like,
you can win the fight, but that doesn't help you if you die from the infection.
But he eats all this food.
Okay.
Same as the cat.
All right, Mary, that's not water, is it?
What have you been drinking?
I've been drinking coffee. What's in this?
Oh, I can eat some coffee.
Oh,
there's no coffee.
Mojito. That's pretty strong.
You made it.
All right. So, freshwater fish, if possible. Remove the sediment from the bottom of the enclosure where you're raising your fish. If you remove the sediment, You can prevent the anaerobic conditions from ever happening, which means prevent the methyl mercury from ever forming. No methyl mercury won't concentrate into the food supply, and you can prevent that. What? Yeah. Is that a spider?
Yeah.
Oh,
all right. Coffee cup.
Oh, okay. You can prevent the mercury from ever getting into your system in the first place. All right. Really quick, let me go take a look at our comments and see what's going on. All right. Joe's saying that the red snapper, I'm not going to try to pronounce that because I'll murder it, is so good. The ban was placed on in the late 90s, and by the year 2015, they began easing the ban. It's a medium-sized fish, maybe about the size of tilapia. I've had snapper before, and yeah, it's a very popular restaurant fish. Snapper is.
What do I think of snapper? I think
snapper,
it's turtle.
Grumpy.
I'm sorry, I think a turtle.
Swordfish you might not want.
No, it's gross. And a lot of chopping. Okay, if you get a swordfish, you have to literally clear off all the outside layer.
No. I know it's popular in fancy restaurants, but swordfish is a fish that excretes its waste through its skin.
Yeah, you have to clear all that.
It's not very nice.
To fish for if you're snagging and you can't do it near most dams. It's
swordfish comes out of the ocean. You don't snag it.
I'm thinking spoonbill.
You're thinking spoonbill.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a different one.
Forget I ever said anything.
Yeah. Also, I'm not sure what the laws are on spoonbill, but I think there's very limited fishing of it.
You can't fish for it below the dam. Because that's the easiest place, and I used to hide our.
Yeah, the rules are you have to fish for it like it was a sport fish, even though it's not really a predator; it's a filter feeder. It feeds off the bottom.
Okay, so we fish for below the dam, but then we release it because it was kind of gross. Like you take your first one.
Yeah, you're allowed to catch it by snagging, but not by deliberately snagging or something.
No, you can't.
Or you can't snag it, or I don't know what the rules are. Anyway,
you weren't allowed to snag it, but we'd catch one. We'd bring one home, try it out. We'd take out the top layer of skin because of the issue with the skin. Yeah. All right. And that was the only one we'd ever do.
All right. Let me get back to my comments. Okay.
Well, mostly for trying it out.
So Eric says it's cool how light it is there when it's getting dark here. Yeah, actually, I was doing the broadcast at 8 previously, but I discovered somewhere in between 8 and 9 it got too dark outside here. So I started moving it up to 7:30 so we'd have enough light to get through at least 1 hour before the screen just went black and white. Because even though I've got light up above me, most of the light that we have is coming from outside.
We can get more.
All right. John is saying mercury is used in electronics and fluorescent bulbs. That's true. Since we've taken mercury and separated it from the sulfur and mercury sulfide, and now using the mercury for various industrial applications, we have to figure out what we're going to do with this stuff. So it's this material that we've got, and we go, well, it's toxic. Just about every application we have for it is toxic, but it's so useful. We have to keep on finding uses for it. Otherwise, what do we do with it? We have to put it someplace where it won't hurt us, hopefully, and that's why the fluorescent bulbs weren't really a great application of mercury, because ultimately those things wind up going to landfills. The bulbs get broken and the mercury escapes into the environment. Not really a good use for waste mercury. But we'll continue to play with it until we figure out what we can do that won't poison us, I hope. At least we need to be aware that it can poison us, so we'll try to find something to do with it that won't get it back into the food supply. But I don't have a copy yet.
I can always entertain people until you get back.
Mm-hmm. Jim is saying, I once had a job removing mercury-contaminated soil from under broken gas pipeline pressure gauges. Ooh. Yeah, because we used to use, I guess in some cases they're still using it for instruments because it's able to withstand large amounts of pressure.
Maybe we should swap seats next time.
I don't know. Would you like to go get some more coffee for me?
Yeah, but I have to, my butt.
You can walk in front of the camera.
My butt.
Just wiggle it when you walk by.
No.
Thank you. All right.
Can I go in the back door?
Did you leave the back door open?
No.
Oh, yeah. Well, either way, you'd have to walk in front of the camera. Oh, wow.
Awkward.
So liquid mercury has been used for precision instruments, mainly because it has such a resistance to being compressed. It can be compressed, but it resists enough that you can reliably make measurements with
Repeat
mercury.
that. You had a bunch of road noise. Repeat that.
Oh, sorry. Um, because of the difficulty that mercury has in being compressed, you can put it under a lot of pressure and be able to reliably make measurements with it because of its compressibility.
Okay, I'm
All
gonna
right.
take
Yeah.
the camera.
All right. Let me do that.
I'm gonna make you go. I'm more entertaining. I can tell the old
So
people.
broken gauges from gas pipelines, oil pipelines, any other kind of pipeline, really. Yeah, that would be a place where you get mercury. Standard maintenance, he says, was to dump the mercury out of the gauge, repair it, then fill it up again. Oh wow!
There's a thing out there. The cat's back.
All right.
Sorry. Sorry.
Eric is saying that's why you can eat Asian carp because they don't eat other fish. Well, yeah, an Asian carp is a vegetarian, so the only mercury it's going to be exposed to is whatever happened to be in the aquatic plants that it was able to eat. So, Asian carp, mullet. Incidentally, I keep on talking about mullet being a great fish. I like mullet because, like salmon, it's a fish that has a lot of oil. So it's an oily fish. Lots of calories, lots of fatty oils, lots of good fatty oils that are good for us, and also lots of protein. And of course, since it's mostly a vegetarian and can very specifically be raised as a vegetarian exclusively, you can avoid getting that concentration of mercury from things like mullet if we were farming mullet. Unfortunately, here in the United States, we don't do a lot of mullet farming. Not many people in the United States know the value of mullet as a food fish, other than people in Florida and Hawaii. That's about the only places where people know about it. But mullet is one of those fish that can be found in a lot of the waterways in the United States. It's found here in Oklahoma, incidentally. Uh, Part of its entire life cycle is breeding offshore, and then it moves inland to get big. So kind of exactly the reverse of salmon, where salmon have to move inland to breed, mullet breed offshore and then come inland to freshwater in order to get big. Some of them, they never go far upstream. Some of them just stay in the deltas if they can. Of course, it's difficult to live in the deltas these days due to algae blooms, things of that nature. All right. Okay, yes, they do eat from the bottom, but they don't eat. We're talking about the Asian carp. They eat from the bottom, and the mullet do too, but they don't consume fish that have been consuming other phytoplankton and mercury. So they only have the amount that was in the plant material to begin with. Now, Eric is asking if they have microbes that eat the mercury. Yes, there are a number of microbes that consume mercury. Well, specifically, they're consuming sulfur and other compounds that may be bonded with the mercury, and that's actually where the problem comes from. The microbes are doing the consumption. Whenever they excrete the waste product of, say, mercury sulfide, cinnabar, or vermilion, that very simple basic compound, they excrete mercury along with carbon and hydrogen attached to the mercury atom, making methyl mercury. And it's the methyl mercury that unfortunately gets absorbed up into the food chain. So in this case, microbes eating it doesn't help us too much. John is saying recycle it. That's what we do. We try to, well, nowadays, we try to find uses for that mercury. That's why it wound up being used in fluorescent light bulbs in the first place. It was trying to find something to do with that waste mercury other than letting it get back into the oceans and getting into our food supply. All right. John said, well, it may be a good fish, but not a haircut. Nah, not a good haircut. Too bad catfish are bottom feeders. Yeah. Wild caught catfish, not necessarily the best thing to eat around here. yeah, it's getting better. We're far up enough upstream. We're above a lot of the industrial processes that might contaminate the water, but we're not totally beyond contamination at this point. Hmm. Hmm. Joe's saying Asian carp good. No wonder Papa Prepper here on YouTube subbed carp for tuna in tuna fish salad. His family he loved it. Ate it with Malabar spinach wraps. Nice. Um, incidentally, if you are getting a fish, wild caught or otherwise, those cicadas are loud. If you're getting your fish uh, like a carp or tilapia for that matter, it's a good idea to put it into a clear water tank for at least a week before you eat it. That'll allow it to get all of its waste out of its system, makes it taste a whole heck of a lot better. If you've ever had tilapia or carp and you found the taste to be a bit foul, it's a good chance that it wasn't properly purged before it was butchered. So there you go. Pro tip for you: purge your fish for at least a week in clear water before you kill them and clean them, and they will taste much better. All right. Let's see. Joe's saying carp bones, no problem. Like sardine bones, I guess. My granddad used to capture carp, used to catch carp, really big ones, whenever he was out fishing, and he would bring them in and cook them in a pressure cooker, and that made the bones soft enough that the bones could be eaten too. And he donated those to the orphanage back in the days when orphanages were completely charity affairs that were run by donations. He donated food. I'm sure quite a lot of orphan kids grew up eating carp on Tuesdays or whatever day that he brought the fish in, and we're glad to have it. Hmm. I guess Mary's cooking more or making more coffee for us. Let's see. Carp and tanks. Nice. Oh, Mary's using her text to talk indoors while she's making coffee. Okay, so here we go, folks. That is, let's see, what did we cover? How the element was formed in the first place, fusion inside of suns like ours, stars like ours, our sun. How it gets to be in combination with other metals. How those metals come out and are deposited. Why we use mercury, and of course what happens to it after we've used it. Um, Naturally, we capture as much as we can after we've done our industrial processes extracting metals. But some of the solids that are left behind are going to have traces of mercury and mercury compounds in them. That's why the quest has been on to find other uses for mercury. That eventually led us to doing things like making fluorescent light bulbs. Any of that winds up going into the oceans and streams or into lakes and reservoirs winds up being deposited at the bottom. And if anaerobic conditions exist that allow for anaerobic bacteria to grow, well, there are some anaerobic bacteria that will consume compounds containing mercury, and they will excrete methyl mercury as a waste product. The methyl mercury then can be taken up by plants, specifically phytoplanktons, and then accumulated up into the food chain. So a couple of different ways we can prevent getting contaminated with mercury and other heavy metals. One, maybe we can possibly stop using those metals as much as we have been. Coin metal, gold and silver, has made a lot of it for several hundreds of years, but we're still using it for other industrial processes. Maybe we might want to think about using less of it and maybe not having as many of these industrial processes. I know it sounds crazy, but maybe we don't all need cell phones and a new computer every year. Maybe we can build things with a bit more resilience that last a bit longer. Runaway consumerism just might kill us all if we're not careful. Perhaps maybe more of us learning to live by growing our own food in our own yards and not going out to get these heavy metals and have to be reliant upon them for our daily lives might be a good idea. Does that mean that maybe not as many people watch YouTube videos? If that's what it takes, maybe. But if we are going to continue to use those materials, then we have to look at ways to prevent them from getting uptaken into the food chain. And that, of course, means trying to avoid anaerobic conditions in the ponds and reservoirs that we're growing fish for, when we're deliberately growing fish instead of wild catching them. So stopping anaerobic conditions in your stock ponds would be a great way to stop you from ever getting that methylated mercury into the food chain in the first place.
Yeah.
Ooh, coffee. Thank you.
It's instant. I made it probably regular.
Oh, you made some instant? Okay.
And some regular, but it's taking a while.
Yeah, is this the Folgers instant?
Taster's Choice?
Taster's Choice? Oh, okay.
Best for campers everywhere. If you're camping, oh my god, you'll love this.
Today's live stream brought to you by Taster's Choice Instant Coffee. Best for campers everywhere. Ding! Okay. Oh, yeah. It's a Crying Shame is taken off because it's chow time. All right, so we covered where the mercury came from, where the elements that it was used on came from, how it wound up into the food system in the first place, how to avoid getting into the food system. Now, yeah, let's talk a little bit about what it does in your food system, what it does in the food system, what it does in the body. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about poison ivy and what poison ivy actually does, and the reason that it's effective as an antimicrobial. Poison ivy is effective as an antimicrobial because whenever it comes into contact with the skin, it provokes an immune response. The body sees that chemical and says, ooh, we have to do something. And it sends white blood cells to the affected area. If the affected area was a place with a persistent infection, the influx of new white blood cells creates an environment that hopefully will attack the infection and eliminate it. That's why poison ivy is an effective antimicrobial. Now, there are certain applications for heavy metals where they're used to aggravate the immune system also, to provoke the immune system to form antibodies specifically for certain things that may be injected into the body. But, like kicking over a hornet's nest in the middle of a picnic, everything else around can also be affected as well. So maybe not a really great use for mercury, guys. All right. Create synergistic transformation says solar panels on the as a source of mercury contamination or other heavy metal contamination, because, well, let's face it, we use an awful lot of heavy metals and we use a lot of mercury to get them. Vicky says, sorry I'm late. We'll watch the replay later. Thank you for watching the replay, Vicky. All right. Joe is saying his dad told him that there are mercury mines here in Sierra Gorda. Joe is down there in southern Mexico, which is the branch of the Sierra Madre Oriental, which rings the Gulf Coast. Is the mercury processed and found in rock form? Most likely, yeah. It's most likely found as cinnabar, that red ore that with the pigment vermilion would be made out of. Let's see. What can you not dissolve with mercury? You can't dissolve iron. You can't dissolve cobalt, tungsten, or tantalum. So iron, cobalt, tungsten, and tantalum, all of those metals you can't dissolve in mercury. But I think that's just about it. Get some coffee on my finger. Yum. Other than that, everything else can be processed using mercury. And that's the reason why it's still, to this day, so heavily used for industrial applications. It's just so, unfortunately, it's so useful. It's so very useful. All right. So we're coming up on 1 hour. Guys, wow, 1 hour. Is there anything that I overlooked? how to get rid of mercury once it's in your system, yeah, I might make a video on that sometime in the future. That's worth looking into. Vicky is saying there's reasons why being condemned to the mines was considered, it was considered a punishment worse than death in all actuality. Brian says you can play with it in your hand. It's fun. Yeah, it is fun to play with, but problematic. And mankind's been doing this with mercury. It's just about every application I can come up with. It's toxic, but it's so useful. It's so useful, and it slips through our fingers, and then we wind up eating it. So I don't know. Maybe we can find other ways to get things done other than using mercury. Does that mean that maybe we don't use as many of the metals that we currently use? Maybe. Maybe certain things get more expensive. Do we all really need to be walking around with cell phones pressed up against our heads day in, day out? Do we all really need to be using laptops that wind up becoming obsolete and useless after just a few years? I know it's very tempting. How do I connect to people on the internet without these machines? How do we continue to communicate globally without the machines? Hopefully somebody out there can come up with a good way of doing it that doesn't involve poisoning ourselves. In any case, we are going to wind down here, and I'm going to do a little bit of guitar picking, because I can tell we're losing our light. Picture's going to be black and white before too long. I hope you guys can hear okay. No, Vicky, I did not cover mercury in dental amalgam, but it's another place we wind up with mercury getting into our bodies. Vicky's saying, Jason, do I recall right that the Mad Hatter was a victim of mercury poisoning? Yes. Insanity is one of the signs of mercury poisoning. Or, more specifically, possibly, an autoimmune disorder that attacks the central nervous system is a symptom of mercury poisoning. See, autoimmune disorders, a lot of them are a result of something kicking the hornet's nest that's the immune system and causing it to attack whatever it can find that it thinks might be the culprit. Sometimes what gets attacked is simple proteins, like the ones that are found in peanuts, or gluten, which, oddly enough, a lot of people owe their lives to being able to eat bread and gluten and peanuts and things of that nature. So having them become things that people are allergic to is a little bit disturbing. What caused that allergy in the first place? Well, it might be heavy metal contamination, something aggravating the immune system not knowing how to deal with whatever was aggravating it. Similar things can happen to the the fatty sheaths that surround the nerves in our bodies, causing diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, degenerative brain disorders, which the Mad Hatter presumably had. Hmm. All right, let me see what's going on here. So yeah, the Mad Hatter was suffering from mercury poisoning, or alternatively from an autoimmune disorder that attacked the nervous system brought on by exposure to mercury. Mercury was being used, or has been used for a long time, to shrink cloth, which is what hatters were doing with felting. They were making felt, which is little particles of wool or other fur, and then pressing them and shrinking them using mercury oxides. Alrighty, folks. Hey, it's been an hour and starting to get dark out there. So once again, as always, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and visiting us tonight. Hope you found the video informative or entertaining, maybe a little bit of both. And if you did, well, you know what to do. And good people, I will catch you next time.